my academic 22 years ago when I finished undergrad, and my dad came to me. I was like, I have absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I was in business. I love marketing and I wanted to do something with marketing, just didn't know what. And then my dad came to me. It's like, that's pretty obvious. Go to like grad school and become a professor. I'm like, fascinating. I think instead I'm gonna go to Scotland and be a bartender for a little bit and try to figure that out. And then 12 years later, it's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go to grad school. And he's like, yeah, it took you long enough. So now I see those 12 years. It was like that was the time that I needed to try other things, so that when I try academia, I had a comparison point. It was like I really love this job, and trust me, I tried a bunch of other stuff. So that's how I tell that story now. And it was also funny in 2018 when I met with my PhD advisors. We're discussing topics for my dissertation. This was like our very first meeting. And they said, like, look, something that's been in our mind is like risk and uncertainty from a marketing perspective. And we think there's a lot there. And I was like, that's my dissertation right there. Let's do it. It's like, you don't want to talk about it anymore? I was like, no, 100%. Like, I didn't know why. It's like, I'm really interested in this. They spent a full hour pitching other ideas, and it's like, great, thank you very much. Let's go back to risk and uncertainty. And then when I shared that with my dad, who now is like, he rubs it in my face. I was like, took you long enough, see my advice. I was like, I'm gonna study risk and uncertainty. And he said, yeah, I'm not surprised. Do you remember when we were about 14, I got an offer to go play for a club. In Brazil, like you don't go professional soccer through college, you go through a club, and then and I was 14, they made an offer coming over, play with us. But it took nobody could drive me, so it was like a 90-minute committed on the bus to get there, train for a couple hours. So I did what my dad described as like a risk analysis. It's like I can't do it because it's going to take away study time, and this is like a low probability job. Like all of that. And it's like, you're great, you're already doing that at age 14. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. It's 100% not why I did the risk analysis. And that's the first lesson that I would like to share with you. The risk analysis, the reason why I didn't go is because I was terrified and I didn't think it was good enough. And risk analysis is great for that, because then you can actually convince someone that you're not doing something for very legitimate and rational reasons. And then hide your fear, and people's like, that's very reasonable. Don't do it. So that's the first warning. Be careful with risk analysis. It's good for a lot of stuff, but it has its caveats. So I realized, I think, like, again, looking into this risk uncertainty, like why I think I study this, because I think it's pretty common if you go into the PhD, somehow you study yourself. And I think that's one. Like, and I had meaningful encounters with it, like risk and uncertainty in my life. And I'm just gonna share it two with you. One was during undergrad. It was my stats professor, and he said, like, look, if you answer anything during your undergrad in business with a very sure yes or no, I'm a little terrified of it, because we're in the business of it depends. If your answer is like it depends and then you elaborate, I cannot trust you. If you say strong yeses or no, I'm a little afraid of you and I want to look in your face. I was like, I love that. From like a very uncertain person by nature. I was like, you're telling me that I can embrace this as a lifestyle break. And then several years later, randomly, I'm at this talk by a Buddhist Lama. I'm not Buddhist, but I was there with curious, and then he started it by saying, a lot of people come to these events looking for answers. And if you're looking for those answers, you're going to be disappointed. And if you go somewhere else looking for answers, you should be suspicious. What I hope is that you come out of it with better questions as opposed to answers. And that blew my mind. I was like, oh, that's great. So I've embraced that. And that's been my academic journey, trying to get better answers or better questions. And I have more questions than I did before, fewer answers. And yeah, I guess like if academia doesn't work, I'll start code, because it's like a lifestyle to embrace the uncertainty and that way. Perfect. So let's see. Let's talk about the session. So what to expect? When I said, it's like, yeah, like, would you like to talk about risk and uncertainty? It's like, for ISBM, it's like 100% let's do it. And then when we got closer and I saw the names of all of the speakers, and then I was being referred to as the expert, I was like, dang. I was like, there's imposter syndrome, which you don't know, and there's imposter. So, and I was like, how do I address this? And I was like, this is how I'm gonna address. There's like experts that you're gonna listen throughout. They're very good in their specific fields. They can give you specific advice and suggestions. I'm gonna use a more malleable definition of expert so that I feel better about you. And if you want someone who's like who can bounce around questions, I am obsessed with risk. I read a lot about it. I think a lot about it. At some point, I think I've been the largest consumer of post-it notes to keep track of all that. So if you want to talk to someone that will make you come out of a conversation coming out with more questions than you did before, I'm your expert. Right, but so the purpose of the session then is to have like a discussion, more high-level discussion about risk and uncertainty. I would love it for it to be a discussion where you participate and I want your input. And I think there's going to be a good chunk of this presentation that you're going to go, that's pretty obvious. My goal, and I hope that happens, is that there's something that you're dealing with at your job that is like a challenge that you see it as risk or uncertainty, that coming out of this session, you get at least one more angle that you can look at that can help you deal with that. If you come out with one of those, happy days. I got my objective. Sounds good? Yeah. All right. And then for me, I just get to talk about this stuff that I'm very passionate about, and my friends can take it anymore. That's all I got. All right. And before we get started, as Lane said, I'll share all the materials later. And Catherine's a PhD student at Penn State. We're working on a qualitative study on trying to identify the categories of risk that matter to you, B2B marketing manager, and then come out with potentially a dashboard where you can have like different KPIs where you can measure those risk exposure through time. So if you're interested in being part of that research and talking to us, let us know at any point. And I'll share all of the materials that I mentioned in the slide. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to ask you to do very quickly, it can be with the person next to you, could be individual. It could be based on the slide that we saw with the challenges. But usually when we're talking about risk and uncertainty, my start is like, what's keeping you up at night? Like what's bothering you? And then talk to the person next to you, see if you find some common challenges. And then we're going to use those challenges that you identified throughout the session and see if any of these that I'm going to talk about make sense for you. So I'm going to give you about like a minute to chat that. Then I'm going to check a little bit what you said and then move on. Okay? That got so lively and so fast that it took me back. I think I'm getting too used to teaching like senior undergrads. It's like, now go ahead and talk, and you wait like for 3 minutes for the first conversation to start, and you guys are like, well, let's go. So, yeah, all right. I'm going to share some of those challenges that you're dealing with.
He's good.
All right.
So we're always looking for ways to create new markets. So we're in old industry and there's not a lot of innovation. And so our business marketing is also really driven by new business development. So we're a part of the business development team. And we have had to do a lot of projects within our organization that were necessary for a long time. And looking for and finding and reaching new markets that we can play in that will pay for we think we've already have to do.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure surrounding
Right.
that. And the risk is not being able to find or reach those markets.
Okay.
And either adequate amount of time or maybe some of them don't exist. So there's a lot of intangibles surrounding.
Right. So like finding or like or not finding.
Yes.
Okay. Is that like also the like do you guys sometimes find and enter but then don't develop it less like or
No,
less so?
not really. So we've been around for years.
Okay.
And really everything that is done within what we do. So we're in limestone, we have a limestone line. Has already been done. So really looking for innovation is difficult.
Right.
It's not something that is a traditionally research innovation type of product. And so there is, we're in all of the spaces that exist already.
Okay.
And so it's really finding those intersections of where new spaces develop and show up, and then having those be attractive enough that we would enter them and then work on doing those. And what's interesting is that as we've gone through that business development process, there have been, a couple swings and, getting to first base, but not necessarily home runs. But what we have identified through that process is that we are not doing a good enough job in business to business marketing, where we exist already, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of identified room there where we can reach people and not necessarily have to find a new market to do it.
Right.
But it is limited, like we will only do that in certain spaces where our specialty lie rather than.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Someone else, one more?
We identify the risk of a new leader coming into an organization or someone you're gonna report to that maybe doesn't have a history of context in the organization.
Right.
How do we help them maybe learn more quickly to ultimately become less of a risk if the so
Right, fair enough, yeah, that's a good one, alright. Thank you. Alright, so as you like, I'll come back and ask a little more about your examples, but let's take those examples now and just like very quickly think about this. Like if the challenge that you described and that you're dealing with, would you classify it as more like in the domain of risk? Is it in the domain of uncertainty? Maybe you say like risk and uncertainty is the same thing, so I don't care about expression. It could be that you think it's like they're different and my problem includes both, or you could say neither. I don't know. Just something to keep like a mental note there. And if that's like if you see that example, and you're thinking about it and how to frame it from a risk and uncertainty perspective, then how would you start to define risk and uncertainty? And this is everybody knows about risk is not a new term. Like we all have like a very strong intuitive notion of what risk and uncertainty are, which is great. But also when it comes down, it's like, yeah, but what is it? Usually like, I don't really know. Like I never who thinks about what risk is? So everybody knows. So it's like, well, that's like where sometimes it gets confusing to manage and deal with that because the terms are not very clear and sometimes used interchangeably. Let me give you one example. When I started studying, I first read like this is like a timeline. I don't know if it's a timeline of how risk and uncertainty have been defined from different fields, like the major definitions across time, if you will. And in like 1921, you say, oh yeah, risk you can measure, uncertainty you can't, right? That was like a very clear definition of those. And the principle here was, well, the reward that you get for risk is when you take chances on stuff that you can't measure and that you don't have a lot of information. Like, fair enough. Then a little bit later, more on the like engineering side and also risk analysis, like a new major definition came up where risk is like what could go wrong and what are the consequences. So it's like the probability of loss versus magnitude of loss. And the uncertainty really was like related to that probability of likelihood. And it was like, okay, think about we're building a bridge. What could go wrong and how bad would it be? And that would be like one application of that. But fundamentally already different approaches to risk and uncertainty. And then by our 2000s, it's like, okay, we need something for like that is standard definition for business. And then we have a new one, which is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So now you have the same thing, but the difference is between you measure or not. This is like, oh no, they're related, but different. And this one is like, oh yeah, one is like causes the other, sort of. I was like, okay, great. And then more recently, risk analysis has been trying to take a more democratic and like everything's fine. We can do about like we can incorporate everything where uncertainty about how bad it's going to be is more like on the risk domain, and not really knowing or limited knowledge is uncertainty. So after reading about that from the first like 6 months of my PhD, this was me. It's like, well, I was so happy with the first one. Why can't I just pick the first one? But I like what more recently the Society for Risk Analysis has been doing. It's like, look, it doesn't matter. This is what matters. Is this something that you value? Meaning, if it happens, the negative outcome that you're thinking about, is it something that matters to you? Yes, move on. Is it something that there's like a chance that a bad outcome will happen? Yes, great. And is it relatively limited in terms of knowledge? Because if you know exactly, it's like, oh yeah, it's something that I value, it's bad, and it's 100% gonna happen. It's like, probably not like a risk domain. Like you could use the risk management to see how you contain it, but so that's what it matters. Like it really is like in the eye of the beholder. If it's something that you care about, and there's a possibility of something bad happening, that's risk. That's good enough. Even if nobody cares. I'm from Brazil. Brazil's playing Scotland tonight. That's a risk for me. It's a bad outcome. That's minor risk for many of you if we lose. which I say, how dare you, but okay. So it doesn't matter if you can measure, and here's a big important one. It doesn't matter if you should measure. Not everything should be measured. And it doesn't matter if everyone agrees, or even if the source of uncertainty is known. If you hit these 3 boxes here, it finds a more comprehensive definition. So this is me after, so it's like, okay. So what it does, like, there's so many definitions out there that seem different and conflicting, but they can now all coexist in a world where, even like risk analysis, like, use the definition that is the most appropriate for your scenario. Doesn't matter. And that's where kind of we are. Just for reference, if you go to their glossary, there are 7 definitions of risk to pick from, 6 measurement examples, 2 definitions of uncertainty, and 6 definitions of uncertainty. It's like, pick the one that is the best for your context. That's the goal. It changes a lot. So essentially anything could be risk. And it's like I asked Gemini, it's like, make me a picture of something very risky. And there's guy, I'm investing all my money in chicken coin. And there's like a guy like bungee jumping on the back, like anything on that, like, could be like, you choose. It's like, it's up to you. Whatever you think is risky. So now that we put it on that, we're going to talk about 2 major quadrants here. On the y-axis here, you have the state. And so we're ignoring the bottom one, which is the low stake. That's like, doesn't really matter to you. And we're focusing on the top one. It's like, if it happens, it matters to you. The difference is where sometimes you can measure something and then try to do something about it. And sometimes that's not really a lot that you can do about it in terms of measurement or even knowing. And that has consequences to how we think, how we react, and what we do next. And then hopefully, if you can put your examples into that, and I'm going to show you what the research shows how we usually react to that stuff, and then the good things that follow, or the bad things that follow. Make sense? So, let's see. All right, so, again, with your example, just keep that in your mind. With the things that you discussed, which quadrant would you put it on? Like, would it be more on the like, yeah, I think I can measure some of it and can try to estimate, or it's like, yeah, it's like really not known what we should do. And keep this in mind. So now, for the one that we can measure and versus the one that not always, here's a few things to consider. The risk management strategies that you use tend to be very different for both kinds. It's like, if you can measure, you can try to like, okay, let's try to reduce the impact, or at least reduce the likelihood, and you have more agency. Here is more like, I don't know, it might happen. And if it happens, the best that we can do is adjust and adapt, and then what you can do about it. And usually they have different goals. Right? One is like, let's go back to normal after the whole thing is done. And here is more like a resilience approach. It's like, we can't avoid it. It's going to hit it. And now risk management means like, how normal is are we operating while this happens? And different tools. So you have, you can try to optimize, or be robust, or be preemptive, versus here, it's like, maybe you stop and react quickly as things unfold, right? So the tools available to you are different. And usually here, more data, more analysis can be useful, versus the other one is more information, not necessarily more, but better information, better research, and better analysis can be useful. Right? So I'm about to get you to work with the people next to you again, but just like a big summary, often when we're dealing with that risk, there's like high stake and low uncertainty. We like don't really like we kind of can predict the things. This is like a picture that I think that summarizes the cognitive responses usually to this kind of risk. It's analytic. Like when you're dealing with something like that, it's like, oh, it's bad, but we have some information and measure. You'll see someone's like, okay, let's do analysis spreadsheets and all of that. And then there are consequences to that kind of The other one, when you really can't measure much, the analytical brain usually switches off, and it's more the flight or fight, or I don't know what to do. So, like as a summary, if you see a colleague in a situation like this or like this, you know what kind of risk they're dealing with. Right, so it's just like a big one. And one thing that I will that has an implication to how people make decisions in companies is that when you have the data and you calculate and their probabilities, usually there's evidence that people tend to be more risk taking because that agency or having the numbers and the predictability is like, okay, let's do it. Like we know what we're doing. And then obviously there are good sides of it, but there are also sides like, should we really be taking that risk? And the other one, it's more like avoidance, like where you don't want to take any chance, right? Not necessarily they're good or bad reactions, but it could be reactions that you're like showing that you may or may not even be aware of. So one thing that I will share with you after this, and that I suggest is there are very simple scales that you can know how risk tolerant you are, how risk taking you are, or how much you avoid uncertainty. This could vary through time, and this could be specific to context. So if you're dealing with a certain situation that you really like a risk analysis for that, might be a good idea to see where you are, because this could help uncover your biases. Like it could help you know if you're more likely to be this person or this person in either scenario. So I'll share that with you. And I think that's like usually where I start. Like, please understand how you deal with it before you start analyzing it. And then look at for the same thing of people in your team. And one of the biggest things here is that sometimes we fall into the trap of like risk management as risk analysis is the elimination of risk and elimination of uncertainty. I know when I say it, everybody goes like, yeah, like we can't do that. But very automatically, we find ourselves in that situation again, trying to eliminate it. Sometimes it's possible. It's great when you do it. Most times, it's more about like embracing it, seeing what you can do. So usually that's what it's like. And I love this cartoon here because, you know, especially with uncertainty and not knowing, we tend to be so uncomfortable with it that we would rather find something like factual, simple, easy to digest, even if it's not true, versus, you know, if the uncertainty is there because it's complicated and hard, people's like, I'm not standing in that one. And I'm sure that there are no shortage of examples that we can think of that could apply. So before I move on, now we're gonna kind of, with all that in mind, get like more hands-on. Any questions before I move on to the next? All right. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to ask you again to, with the person next to you, this is like some of the traditional risk management strategies proposed by risk analysis. Like nothing revolutionary. I didn't come up with this. It's like all the ways. I put one example here just for reference. And what I'm going to do is like discussing with the person next to you using the same examples or different examples. Like, what do you think the risk management strategies, which one would be appropriate in your examples and why? Which ones would be not appropriate in your example and why? And I think also like some of the dangers or challenges of using that specific risk management strategy. That makes sense? Then I'll let you talk for a couple of minutes. Then I'll go over some like a framework for risk analysis. Look at like after you look at it, then I'm going to ask you to come back and say, now that I show you this, how would you adjust your risk management based on what you know already with this time? Does that make sense? Right. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here, and then we'll circle back.
But I'll try. Try.
Share. Yeah,
Yeah. That's what that's. Okay, let's go. Okay, so let's see. Risk management. Who wants to share some thoughts here on some of these that like they could be applicable or not applicable, or I don't know. Here you can.
One of the approaches of risk management, we want to, what if it's like learn more, right? So, is that number reduced? We think we put a number reduced, but.
It's fair, yeah. I'll probably put it into that, and it goes into that kind of risk, and like more knowledge will be great. So could be, yeah. That's fair. Yeah. Let me think about it. Yeah, I'll probably reduce. It could be maybe depending on like accept or tolerate. It's like if it hits, it hits. But if we're more prepared, well, like we can be faster in like reacting. But fair point.
What about changing the goal? Changing what you care about. Match. What would you put that under?
Changing the goal to match the risk.
So in other words, you could have a situation where your goal is this and the environment or whatever makes it a very, very risky, a lot of uncertainty, right?
Right.
But with inside of those same constraints that are creating that uncertainty, you could just shift your goal to something that those things don't impact.
Right, fair enough. I mean, assuming that the new goal is a valuable goal instead of like, like not great, but we'll go with it. I would.
My goal is to be a supermodel, right?
For it.
There's actually probably not a lot of uncertainty there, so maybe that's not a good example, but. But.
You gotta give him the switch.
Then I have to stretch it there. No, but I can say like, you know what, there's just too much risk in this, but if I change my goal to be in health management or body man, like with whatever. That's actually reduces the amount of risk involved, and yet it's still inside of something that I would say would make me within my overall mission or vision. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, because I'm just curious if that would be something different or.
I would probably put it under avoid with the caveat that it's like it's a pivot, it's not right. Yeah, so it's not like an avoid as in like I don't even want to see it. It's like I'm going for a better alternative and I'm avoiding that goal specifically, partly because the risk is so high.
Right.
Goes back to my soccer example. It was like fear, but we know it wasn't. It was risk analysis. It was like, oh, it's too much risk. I'm gonna avoid that and choose this. But I'll put probably the caveat of the pivot. Yes.
I think kind of in that same vein, rather than changing the goal, is untethering yourself to the mechanism to reach that goal. So you can, in our situation, we're kind of accepting where certain things that we've looked at are, and then, changing how we're gonna get there. So as we always do these 5 plans or and how we always go into it thinking this is how we're going to reach that goal. And being able to be malleable in that process, I think we can avoid holes or minimize or reduce it when we come up against something to try and pull out. That's right. Without changing the goal.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I steal something that my intro to marketing professor shared in my undergrad with I teach marketing senior, so they're in the last year, it's marketing strategy. And so I was like, marketing strategy, off the gate, if your strategy plan is like really good, you're 50% wrong. And once you start it, the other, like in that 50%, if you get 50% of it right, you're a really good planner. So off the gate, it's like a quarter, right? So it's like, why do we plan? It's like, now we're going to talk about it throughout the semester. But, like going with the mindset that that's going to have to adjust. Right? And JJ and I we're talking about like one of the risks of risk analysis, right? Like you do the analysis, you have a bit of like so many spreadsheets and formula, little graphs, you look at it's like, damn. And you put it in the drawer, you forget about it because it gives you so much peace of mind. You talk about like the COVID like blueprints. It's like we know exactly we know what to do in the case, and then we're not gonna think about it. And when you hit it's like people's like, hey, we really didn't. Right. So it gives you that false sense of like section sometimes that it's kind of one thing to do. All right. I'm going to walk through some of the stuff here that I want to share with you and have like one final round where after seeing this, would you adjust any of your insights from this slide? And then JT will come over and say, forget about everything that you guys said, and we'll talk about other stuff there. I'm like, I love it. And it's like, I'm very excited for like I couldn't be more excited about the both presentations being at the same time. It's awesome. All right, so there, as we talked about, risk in like a lot of different nations, many shapes, and can have like applies to you. So usually I start with like what's keeping you up at night, and that's a big risk, and and then the conversation starts. Risk analysis, as I just mentioned, it is like the idea that you did something, but it's permanent iteration, right? Not something that you put in a drawer, check a box, and it's like next year I'll do it for compliance. So we have some risks that we are unaware of, like blind spots, and risk analysis doesn't really apply. Don't even know what it is. Right? There are some risks that you're aware of, but you just don't want to face them. Probably not great for risk analysis either, because you don't want to believe it. And then there's like you're reasonably aware of. That's usually the realm of like risk analysis can be a little more useful. But when it comes down to measuring risk, the elephant analogy, right? Like, and so I saw this quote in one of the classic journals that says like figures that the worst thing that not measuring risk is measuring risk with one indicator. So the more get like a richer picture of your risk by having different measures. But be careful. With risk analysis, you can essentially overdo everything. Maybe you don't need 3,000 indicators, but one's better. There's always this debate about subjective, objective, but like whose perception is it? Like who's leading that? Like this is a risk, and what's the measurement? Is there an instrument? How frequently? Who would do it? Who gets the report? Who doesn't get the report? What's the indicator? Who are the stakeholders? That all goes into this risk package of like measuring who helps with the measure, who gets the reports, and everything. And can you identify and measure those columns? Important here, not everything can be measured, not everything should be measured. It's okay to have some risks that are defined in more subjective terms, and then gradually you go back and see if that changes or not. Right? So it doesn't have to be, especially if you're going for a proxy for measurement that is so far from your conceptualization of risk, then it's going to be really like a very noisy proxy. And does it make sense to use it? And instead, risk analysis. Team is better than individual, so usually that works better. Very easy to have blind spots. Find your data person, what those decisions look like, some of the objectives. Try to make them like tractable what you're doing when you're setting those. And a couple of movie references here. When you're looking for your data person, you're probably looking for someone like that. Who like really understands the things in the back, and then it's like, did they have the access to the data that they need, right? And that's it. When it comes down to communication, that in my experience, many times that person is great at data, but not necessarily the greatest at translating that into English. That someone's like, oh, wow, okay. And so, does that person need a liaison? Someone, like who's going to communicate to whom? Who does it affect? Who's the decision maker? That's it. This person is probably the most important person on the team. It's probably the person that you avoid in the hallway for different reasons. But it's the person who's not. Well, the movie analogy here is like you're looking for the devil's advocate. So it's the person who's not shy about saying, I think there are holes in your thinking. It's more than that. It's the person who takes pleasure. Go find that person, put it on the team, because it's so easy to make assumptions that years later you realize it's like all the work was useless because we made some assumptions that we shouldn't have, and then this person will be kind of grinning behind the desk. I was here all the time. Knowledge, is there training? Like, are you guys here to learn something and maybe help you deal with some of the risks that you're facing? The limitations of availability of data and so on. So a big summary of what we just talked about is this, like on the measurement side, analysis side, communication, and so on. So as like a wrap up for the presentation, I wanted to think about the examples that we just discussed. Think about the risk management strategies that we just discussed. Does this help you validate some of the things that you talked about? It's like, what? I think that strategy that we talked about, now that I see this, it actually makes even more sense to me. Or the opposite. It's like, that was like a really good strategy, but I can't see a way of potentially measuring that. And our management strategy was based on that. But now with this, maybe we need to kind of rethink that strategy a little bit, or think it a little more deeply on how you address those challenges. Make sense? How are we doing? We're like almost on time. So I'm just gonna open this on for the floor, and instead of giving you some chance to discuss, so that we can wrap up and then JT can go through. Any thoughts on this? Like any strategies that more insightful? Yes.
I guess my, one thing I tend to sort of really struggle in day-to-day decision making is like speed. Cause that could be like more analysis, right? But I mean, also one thing the business is asking is like, hey, we need to make a quick decision. I mean, we need to trade risk analysis versus agility on decision making.
Right.
Speed. So then I think I honestly, I would love to do all this thorough analysis, but I just wouldn't have time. I wouldn't be given the time to do it
Right.
before a decision needs to be made, right? So.
Right. I
So
love that.
what would be some of the lines of trade-off? You would probably get
That's a great point. Yeah, I was like, there's a document that the Society for Risk Analysis shares, and it's like, here's a manual, and I'll share that like on how to assess the quality of your risk analysis. The manual to assess the quality is like already so overwhelming, and like let alone like doing the analysis, like who has kind of time for that, right? And like, I tend to think that you are either saying like, okay, I can't do anything like all of this. What is the single most important one that I can do and why? And if you need more time for that, is there room to negotiate with your leadership saying like, look, this thing that we could lose, it's really representative. Give me a week or give me like, I don't know if it's that, but I agree with you. Most times in like risk analysis, like in my opinion, you don't do the whole thing. It's overwhelming, and by the time you're done, the world is already different. And I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. Right. So that's like a good tension, and I don't have like a great answer, but it was like maybe priority and like what do you do first. And if you think it's really important, usually what gets the attention is like, remember, if the bad thing that we're thinking about happens, it's really bad. So is it really like give me 48 hours to work on this that bad? But that's like a thing that like will be a forever tension with risk analysis. Like, yeah, I could spend 6 months working on this problem and then find a solution for when it's no longer a problem, right? Yeah. But thank you. Yeah. Yes.
That's a quick one. So some risks are usually entangled. So is it a good idea to first disentangle everything or just use multiple methods? Handle the type of risk.
Right. I think you would get different answers from who you ask. I really like the framing that the risk is based on what you stand to lose if the bad scenario happens, and then frame it as that. If what you're talking about leads to two different things that you can lose, probably lean like gut reaction will be treat them like separately. But if there's like a lot of different things that lead to the same thing that you could lose, I would probably try to treat them as in combination, but not all merged together. That makes sense. So the point of reference, like, what could I lose? And then what all falls under there. Does that make sense? One last one. Did anyone completely change the management? I was like, no, actually, I think I'm gonna double down that. Well, that
Makes you feel more comfortable.
feel more comfortable. Okay, which is good, but also tricky. But yes, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.